Hi everybody and welcome back to B2B NAV, and this week we have a special guest with us in the form of Minke Egling, one of our strategy managers here at BDB. So myself and Minke have been working across a whole variety of strategy and planning and brand strategy projects in recent months, and we've seen some commonality in some areas that our clients are struggling with, some areas some common pitfalls and some common challenges we're coming up against, and I thought rather than myself and Ollie debating this one, we'd get one of the experts in the room to take the conversation forward with us. So welcome Minke. Welcome to the podcast. Don't be nervous, nobody bites. I promise, you're in good company. So in terms of, I guess, strategy is one of those phrases that we always hear kind of bandied around in business, in marketing, and we can come on to kind of how those strategies might tie together. But what does strategy mean to you in the sense of when you hear it, and obviously you work in it and you've chosen to go down that route? What does it mean for you, the word strategy?
Yeah, so for me, because like you said, there's so many different types of strategy, whether it's business, brand, marketing, but what is central to it is really understanding where you are, understanding where you want to be, and everything that's between where you are and where you want to go. And then really just making decisions about how you want to approach the challenges that are between where you want to go. And then setting actionable actions and measurable actions to really achieve that goal that is in the future.
Okay, so we're seeing a lot of businesses at the minute, I think, in particular from the agency perspective, like ourselves, marketing agencies slowly moving towards more communications consultancies and the old game of like management consultancy in a way. And I guess, we're working on a lot of brand strategy projects at the minute.
Yeah.
But you end up naturally going further back into the business as well to understand the business objectives, which flow to the marketing objectives, which flow to the brand objectives, as it may be, to kind of get you across that piece. How have you found that? Because I guess we're speaking to a lot of different stakeholders and a lot of different relationship holders in those projects. Do you think marketing gets the respect it deserves to be at the table for those conversations in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at business strategy, that's probably more like the vision, the mission, setting the strategic objectives of the business. And the way I see brand strategy is like the face of the business strategy. So bringing that to life, articulating that perhaps in a more creative way, and really, especially for corporate or company brands, helping employees to really understand and articulate that brand strategy, and having a common goal of where you're going. And then marketing is more the tactical elements, the right product at the right time at the right price, and really bringing that to life in a more tactical way. Versus the brand.
On that point, that's an interesting one because it links into one of the things I was going to ask you about, but in relation to, obviously, people are very comfortable speaking about where they are now. Yeah. And quite often with strategy work, it's speaking about that vision, that mission of where you ideally want to be. So quite often, I think with clients when we're working with them, we will jump around a bit today, but it takes them out of the comfort zone quite a lot. So I often quite find it when we present back, based on everything they've told us, everything they've said they want to be and all their aspirations, and we said, great, this is you, this is where you need to be then. And you get this kind of awkward, that's not us though. That kind of reaction that you get, and we've had it on calls, and that uncomfortable nature. What do you think? What do you think gives rise to that, despite all the insights and the interviews and everything they've given you in that process?
Yeah, that's what I really enjoy about the BDB process, is that we get to interview all these internal stakeholders, really understand where the business is going, in a sense that you understand the business objectives not just from the top-down approach, but really how the business objectives are shaping the function of the business. And then being able to articulate where the business is going, you're able to do so in a way that's more authentic, and in the words of the actual employees.
I find it really interesting when you play it back to them, and when you say this is what you've told us where you want to be as a business. And then that tends to kind of make them mellow slightly into, actually, I did say that. And you can see the faces as I recall that moment when they felt a bit braver and a bit more confident in the interview of where they want to be.
And usually you do find that the different departments, whether it's a technical person or a marketing person, they end up saying the same things just in different ways of where they do see the company going. And then if there is a disconnect, then that is something that you can address.
Yep.
But usually there is consensus, because even if it isn't written, it is understood where your business is going often.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things you touched on there, which is interesting to kind of dig a little bit deeper into, is obviously BDB we have our approach to strategy, which has been heavily influenced by it since you've joined us in terms of the direction that we want to take it in. And I'm sure anybody could Google business strategy models and you'll find hundreds of different models and templates and ways of doing things, and there's not necessarily a right or a wrong way to do these things. There's just a preferred approach, and most of it with ours is steeped in kind of research and insights, and we want to make sure it goes beyond the classic marketing fluff of just coming up with some crazy strap lines. It's got to be informed and have that kind of substance that's behind it. How much research is enough research in your mind? And I realise this is a very difficult question, by the way, but I mean it in the sense of we get asked it a lot by clients, particularly around should we be speaking to internal people, external people, how many people, and particularly with bigger businesses that are multi-region, multi-sector. What's your take on that?
Well, just to use like the academic research approach, I suppose it's when you reach a saturation point. So when you're starting to hear the same things over and over again, that's when you can stop with a certain route where, like for example, quantitative or qualitative data. Once you hear the same results, then okay, you've roughly got your direction. And then triangulation of data. So it is about desk research and then speaking to, for example, internal stakeholders, validating that with what external stakeholders are saying. So using 3 different research approaches usually works, because then you can ensure that you are getting to a point, and it's not just skewed by what one stakeholder group thinks, for example.
And I think the importance of that external validation as well. So I think it's very much, as I say, part of the kind of the trifecta that you've described there. But you'd be amazed, and I don't think echo your projects that you've worked on before BDB, but the number of companies that don't include that external validation, that they're very keen for you to speak to their team about what they want to be, but unless you know really the customer side or the key stakeholders side of the coin, very difficult to kind of get that validation, I guess, in play.
And that's what's great about doing it internally, is that you can shape the conversation, you can shape the research in a way that can be used. I think that's very difficult if you're using an external research company, which is maybe why some clients are opposed to the research.
It's also expensive, I guess, as well. 'Cause I mean, the way we do it is obviously part of the Encompass fee, but if you do go to an external and you go for like a mass market research or the surveys, obviously you pay a big premium to do that work as well. But without that external validation, I think a lot of people think they know a lot about their customers. So they talk around customer centricity and what a customer centric organisation they are, and when you actually dig deeper into what do they know about their customers, sometimes they may have a lot of data, by the way, some companies, but also a lot of companies are quite out of date sometimes as well with the knowledge. Are they up to date with it? And particularly in some of the sectors that we're working with, I'm thinking of like personal care and the cosmetics that you're working with in the minute. So fast paced and so fast moving that in 6 months you could be out of date to an extent, maybe even less arguably, but it changes so quickly, doesn't it?
It's also about knowing where to hone in on, because often when you'll speak to internal employees, it's this range of things that they can provide as a company, and then it's really hard to know where to pinpoint the direction. And that's what the external validation really helps you to do.
Okay. And then one of the other things I was thinking about, different things that we could touch on, different issues that have cropped up on projects, not issues but discussion points, I guess, on projects at the minute. And one of these points is the competition. So when we do our work, we'll do a competitor profiling, competitor assessment. How important is that in the grand scheme of strategy? Because I've seen other clients that ignore the competition, not bothered about them. And I've got some clients that are obsessed with the competition because they're desperate to make sure they're different, and we can come on to that. But what do you think on that front?
Yeah, it is dangerous. The whole idea of brand positioning is that you are positioning against the competition. So definitely can't be ignored. And then on the other hand, you don't want to copy what the competition is doing in such a way that you are just directly positioned as the competition. So you want to find that gap. So really the competitor analysis is more about opportunity
Mm-hmm.
assessment and the gap analysis.
Yeah.
And then understanding how you can articulate your brand message in a way that is, whether it's differentiated or just distinctive.
I think that's a really important point, though. I do think that's really important because we get a lot of clients and contacts that are obsessed with being different or unique or wanting to stand out or cut through the noise or whatever it may be. And also within certain sectors, you're obviously faced with not a challenge, but just a challenge in differentiation, if I can speak.
Yeah.
In the sense of there's not always that clear hook to make somebody different. And I think that's where, for me, it comes into being more authentic or consistent in the messaging that you're shaping. So if it is a very tightly fought area of the market and everybody has a similar offering, you're obviously searching for those USPs that will make somebody want to work with you. But where there isn't anything genuinely unique, and you do find yourself, we've been there sometimes looking at it going like it's just so similar, it's more, then I think that's where the brand and the messaging and the communication strategy really comes into its own, though, of either if there's a lack of differentiation, make that the focus, that there is a lack of differentiation, be more playful or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
But it plays a bigger part in it for me, yeah. So.
Yeah, perhaps for a challenger brand, it's more important to be differentiated or to be distinctive, to really challenge what is happening in the market.
Mm-hmm.
But especially with the brands we work on that are so global, much bigger presence, often the market leader, then to own a position is more important.
Yeah.
And to stand your ground even if others are moving into it, because you have the heritage to really own it.
Yeah, okay. And I guess what would you consider kind of the common pitfalls to be? So we get engaged by a client, they say they want to look at some brand strategy work, evolve the brand, and I'm focusing on brand purposely today. Obviously the strategy is way much broader than that. I think in more relevance to our clients. What are some of the common pitfalls you tend to see on the projects that you work across, or areas of difficulty that the client or agency may experience?
I was working here for a few months and I read this book by Richard Rummel called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. Yeah, and just like everything he said was just so like on the nose, just so relatable. He talks about fluff, which is like all the gibberish that surrounds strategy and marketing, and in B2B that is even more so because of all the technical jargon. So you can't just focus on these strategic concepts and arguments that mean nothing. Like you really have to cut through the fluff. Also not facing the challenge head on, so setting objectives that just aren't objectives really. And sometimes you'll get a brief, it's not completely the objectives don't really articulate the problem, and that's why these internal calls and interviews are so important, because it helps you understand if the strategic objectives that are set are really the objectives that should be set, or if they need revising. Also mistaking goals for strategy, so often you'll be like an objective will be, we want to be the number one, just for the sake of an example, personal care brand internationally. And that's, although it could be a vision, isn't exactly an objective.
It's more of an outcome, I guess, of delivering the vision or the mission.
So you need to set objectives to get to that goal.
I think particularly where you've got the gap, where you've got the where they are today versus where they want to be, and you say it's that kind of communications and marketing that plays the part of bridging that gap. So you need objectives that you're going to keep incrementally moving you along, don't you, to an extent? So
yeah, exactly. So not setting those objectives in a way that's actionable and measurable. It's really, that makes it really difficult to then start with the strategy. So you really have to get that foundation right, and then the brand strategy starts. And I mean, we've had feedback from clients that say we help them understand their business better than they did, and because of the brand exercises. So that's great. Okay.
And in terms of brands that you see getting it right, or brands that you've worked on, maybe don't reference our own clients here at the minute that we're working on, but in the sense of you've worked in and around strategy for a number of years now, I'm sure you still have brands that you look to for that kind of inspiration. Who's on your hit list?
No, definitely. I mean, I've got the classics. I'm always referring to Coca-Cola, but I won't today. But I have now.
But even again, their brand. I mean, that's more brand, I guess, but it's still strategy. I mean, the way they pivoted during the pandemic and the new branding that they've thrown out, it's always clever. It's always subtle and something small, but it's so clever the way they do it.
So good, and to stake your business on something that's so international, like the idea of happiness. But I must say, okay, from a B2B perspective, DSM is really inspiring.
Yeah.
So coming back to that idea of like what strategy is, and understanding where you are, they were into before 2010, they were just this Dutch local company, and they had this, in terms of the sense of the direction they wanted to go, and they wanted to be international. But it's a very saturated market. I mean, it's basically a chemical company. And to differentiate themselves then in that market, they had to find an unmet need, and they found that in sustainability. So that's more like their assessment of where things stood. They did so much research.
I think the authenticity that stands behind it for them, I mean, now I don't think anybody would even think of them as a chemicals company.
Exactly.
It's, the role that they play, but they were so clear and unswerving in that vision of where they wanted to be. And I guess that along the way, I'm sure there were many doubters and many distractions that would try to take them off piece. But I think, having worked with them for a long time, but also having understood their story, it just seems they were so dedicated to say this is where we're going. And I imagine every year they probably had it in the boardroom of this is where we're going, we've got to stick with this guy, to kind of like cut through it. But.
And not just to say, we want to be international, but they found sustainability to be an innovation to be where they wanted to go. Yeah. So that was definitely something that everyone could then get on board with. Yeah. To be, okay, we want to be sustainable. 80% of our product portfolio, 100% of our product portfolio is going to be sustainable. That's really inspiring. And then of course the CEO won like the UN Humanitarian of the Year award. But like that aside, their profitability shot up and they became this international company, and they were known for life sciences and material sciences and not just this local Dutch chemical company.
But you can imagine if that had been mentioned X many years ago when the strategy was set, you'd have probably been laughed out of the room. Genuinely, I think if you'd have thought the CEO of what was a chemicals company back in the day would be recognised for that kind of award, it's phenomenal to an extent. But I think that unswerving, unwavering vision of this is what we want to be, and then to have actually delivered it, that's what I'm most impressed by. My love of execution matters, and the fact they've actually done it. Exactly. They've not just said it, they've not just produced a glossy board pack and something pretty for everybody to look at with this vision that you tell your team and then never refer to again. They've done it, and they've been there and done it, and I think it's incredible. Yeah,
and I love that they've found that gap, and they and it was an unmet customer need, so it was really needed at the time. And through meeting it, that's how they became profitable. So like a B2C example is probably like a Tesla. Yeah. Now Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. Yeah. It's not because he wants to save the world through electric cars, but because there was such a demand for electric cars, and then the branding on top of that really helped to push it further. So that's really inspiring, these really like forward-facing brands.
But they are, but I think the forward-facing aspect of it is what really probably gets them on your list in terms of, because you think it's the sustainability aspect of DSM before its time, in the sense of really, I imagine, now everybody greenwashing is quite a big thing, isn't it? Everybody jumping on the sustainability bandwagon. It's got to be part of most companies' strategy or CSR or sustainability initiatives in some way. But the fact they were so far ahead, they've now got years of advantage and a head start on people that enables you to be that bit more consistent, authentic, and more that voice of authority on the topic, I guess.
Exactly. And it's risky. It's really hard to take that risk, but it was good.
I'd love to have been in the boardroom. I always think that. I'd love to have been in the boardroom in those discussions I had and listen to the people that say that's not, no, you can't do that, it'll never happen.
Exactly.
Just as a bit for fun. Okay, I mean, we literally could debate strategy all day with you, Minke. There's so many different areas we can go into. But I guess what is it you love about strategy? Because obviously you've chosen this as your career path, like people do, almost like creative or content or different areas of marketing. Strategy runs wider for me. But what is it for you that keeps you interested and gets you out of bed in the morning ultimately to come and work on the types of projects you do?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different in B2B versus B2C strategy. In B2B, what I've really enjoyed is being able to see the whole value chain.
Yeah.
Whereas in B2C, you almost think that, you know, it can sometimes feel like it's your whole world. But when you then enter the B2B space, you realize it's that, like, the marketing aspect is a tiny, tiny portion of this crazy world of everything that goes on behind the scenes to make a product that you see in front of you. So that's been really eye-opening and really like changed my perspective on it.
I think it's very technical, but I think also maybe it's the exposure you get to all the different parties, isn't it? It's what I find interesting, because you're not just speaking to the marketing function or the comms team. You're speaking to the R&D team, and you're speaking to their suppliers and really technical people sometimes, which certainly stretch my mind. I'm sure as well as yours. You're keeping pace with some of the more technical R&D people, but in the sense of the different personas that you do meet throughout the process.
Exactly.
To me, it just keeps it really interesting and really helps when you are trying to find those hooks. Quite often you don't find them from the people you think you will. Yeah. And, you know, it's one of the side conversations you have with somebody that you wouldn't have thought about necessarily, but, you know, really triggers something in the brain that makes you think, that's it, we've got it now, and we can move through it together. But
like, you think you understand, like, your beverage, but you really don't understand that goes everything.
There's so many different variables, for sure. And then I'll close on this as a question for you, if I may, and I've not prepped you for this, so apologies, I'm going to put you on the spot. But in terms of, I'm always thinking about what's next. It's part of my role as the CEO of BDB to make sure we continue evolve our service offering, and obviously we're working on our strategic service offering together at the minute. But what's next for strategy? Because for me, it's always going to be a thing. Clearly, you've got to have a strategy in some way of where you're heading. Most businesses without a strategy tend to fail, and to some extent. But what do you think the future involves for strategy in terms of making those strategic recommendations and shaping those kind of things up? And I'll give you a clue if you want. In my mind, I'm not trying to put you on the spot at all. It's more of because we're seeing more data, more digital, more analytics coming into everything. Do you think that will influence the way people carry out a strategic consideration, or do you think it'll still go off the kind of similar methods to what we do now?
Yeah, data and analytics is really interesting. I think that will probably be used more as a research methodology. Okay. But in terms of where the industry is going at the moment, because the market is so saturated, so many messages out there, and a lot of B2C brands are more based on performance messaging than real brand building at the moment. Okay. But in B2B, there's definitely this opportunity for brand building and really aligning the brand to the business strategy, which sounds like what you should be doing, but actually
there's been a huge disconnect over the years, and I think that's what I personally find interesting working in marketing and communications at the minute, that really you are talking business strategy. To the extent you're talking about naming conventions of groups and teams and business structures, and is it right, is it wrong, and it's way beyond a colour palette and an image, which I think is what a lot of people think about brand. They instantly go, oh, okay, it's that, and it's not. There's so much more behind it. But yeah, no, I think it'd be really interesting to see where it goes as kind of it's always going to be a part of the mix, but in terms of how people reach the answers or the conclusions.
It's definitely the year of the strategic consultancy.
100%. 100%.
For the next few years.
I think it is. I think it particularly is as an agency if you want to evolve into something more than a tactical agency. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've been very clear on that as our identity, that we don't really want to play in the tactics space in terms of, you know, deliver me a brochure or an ad or, you know, we can do that, but that's not typically the way we operate with our clients. So lots more to come there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Minke. In terms of recommendations of some reading for our viewers and our listeners, I would direct you towards www.b2bknowledge.com, our online ungated content hub helping our clients and prospects navigate the ever-evolving B2B marketing landscape, where coincidentally this month's edition is all around strategy. So if you've got any questions or comments, feel free to get in touch. Thanks again, Minke, and we'll see you next week. Cheers.